It was interesting to hear Senator Thompson start by cutting to the chase and quoting Professor Ferguson at Harvard about the whole kind of decline and fall of the Roman Empire scenario, sliding off the cliff scenario, and compared to Governor Dean talking about it in terms of a generational shift, which seemed to imply, I think, that young Americans who you were talking about have entirely comfortable with ethnicities and orientations of every conceivable variety. And I think a lot of us thought that was the case in the fall of 2008, that essentially enough Americans had decided to belatedly join the kind of Euro-Canadian consensus on what a modern Western democracy looks like. But 2010 was last night was a kind of repudiation of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can't say that it wasn't some kind of repudiation, because there were some people who went to the polls because they wanted to punish the president. There was no question about that. But I believe that it had more to do with economic dissatisfaction. When societies are under stress, they do things differently than they do when they're not under stress. I think we are moving very slowly towards a European-Canadian sort of ideal, but there are some unique things about the United States that make us different. One is the degree of religious belief in our country. Another is, and this may over time change, but another is the real belief in the free enterprise system. That is, because of our enormous history of immigration and people coming to create business opportunities from nothing, from other countries, every family has this history in the States of somebody who sacrificed so that the next generation could do better. And I actually don't view the European model as so terrible. The fact is, I think I disagree with Senator Thompson on the notion of a sudden triggering event causing a collapse. When you look at the European Union, I think it's the most important experiment in governance in the world history since the founding of the United States. That is, the most violent continent on the face of the earth for 1,000 years is now trying to struggle and deal with the question of nationalism. Those are the things that have the chance of changing human history and changing human relationships to bring about a more peaceful world. So I maintain an optimism. I agree that we have to watch out that we may not be the great power, but I think we at our peril, do things that are going to undermine us. And one thing that Senator Thompson and I agree on is the deficit is the biggest danger to the United States, far more dangerous to us than terrorism. And if we don't deal with that, then we will slide down the hill. That we cannot afford to do, but other nations have been in that position and done better, and we're just going to have to do what we have to do, and that's to make some really substantial changes in the way we run government.
Governor Dean was kind of more open than most American politicians are, in that he felt relatively relaxed about moving toward a Euro-Canadian future. Are you and your fellow Tennesseans on board with that?
Not quite. When I think what we're talking about here right now very possibly is one of the big divides among the American people. That is that do you prefer a life, and it's certainly arguable, every country ought to have a right to make its own policies, where security is paramount, that you don't have to work as hard or as long, but your economy doesn't grow as much, and you have all the problems that we're seeing in Europe today, or do you prefer the more of the free to fail kind of entrepreneurial kind of spirit that generates more growth over a period of time? And I think it's ironic now, to take it a little bit further, that we're seeing leadership coming out of Europe that we're not showing. Look at what Great Britain is doing. Look at what Cameron and a coalition-type government over there. Look at what they're doing now. Look at what Sarkozy is trying to do with regard to retirement age, and he's stuck to it and actually got it passed. And they're doing things that I thought would have been the absolute political death knell of any European politician. We are not. We don't even have a conversation, an honest conversation about the problems that we really have and what we might do about it in this country. No, I don't think, I think people look at, people in the United States, many of them, look at Europe and see us and our problems and where we're going to be in the future and wonder whether or not we're going to have the leadership between now and then to guide us around them.
When I spent a lot of time in Europe, and I always like to tell the Europeans, you know, the problem with Americans is we always act without thinking. But the problem with the Europeans is they always think and never act. And now that's beginning to change. And they have a system that is dynamic, and it turns out they can make these changes. And I agree with Fred. We're going to have to make some of these changes ourselves, and I hope we'll get a chance to discuss that.
But not to be, you know, too chauvinistic about it, hopefully, but can we afford, can the free world afford, can the world afford the United States not to do a little bit better job a little earlier than some of these European countries? I mean, if we go down, it's going to have ramifications that we're not going to see if Greece goes down.
That is a very good point. In the end, you know, the Icelandic economy collapsed in 2008, and if you happen to be friends with somebody from Iceland, you feel sorry for them. But if you're not Icelandic, really, you know, it doesn't affect you a lot. If the I understand the point you're making about the you know, the need for flexibility. But in a sense, it's easier for Sweden to be Sweden than it would be for the United States.
But I'm not arguing Sweden. I mean, the United States should be Sweden. I'm not making that argument. I agree. There's the balance. Do we want to disincentivize work? No, we do not want to disincentivize work. We did welfare reform in my state before Bill Clinton did it nationally, because I think it is true that if you give people too many incentives, in fact, you're actually attacking their family.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that it is a good idea to keep in mind that in whatever economic system that you choose, that everybody has to have a benefit. It doesn't mean everybody has to have the same benefit. It doesn't mean you should cap salaries. But it does mean that working people have to be able to feel successful. You know, nobody begrudges people getting rich. In fact, every American hopes that one day they will be rich, and I think they ought to have the opportunity to do so. But you have got to make sure that everybody's climbing the ladder together, not just one segment. And in the last 5 or 10 years in this country, even when Bill Clinton was president, I'd say it was the last 15 or 20 years, the folks at the top do better and better, and the folks at the bottom make no progress whatsoever. And that's a serious problem.
You said that it was the swingiest midterm swing since 1948. I think, in fact, it's currently up over 55 seats, which makes it the swingiest midterm since 1894, midway through Grover Cleveland's second term. If anyone wants to walk into the Oval Office and tell President Obama, Grover Cleveland was a friend of mine, I knew Grover Cleveland, and sir, you are no Grover Cleveland. But at the same time, when you what actually will change?
That's the fundamental question. I think that I think there's going to be a spasm. There's going to be a reaction. You're going to overinterpret your mandate. That's natural. But there's enough there for a new beginning. We can't balance the budget in 1 year. We can't survive and be a prosperous country for long. The real question is that do we have to bottom out? Because if we don't address some of these things, and it's got to be, I mean, I'm not, you know, I think bipartisanship is greatly overrated, frankly. But on the fundamental things, that's the only way it can happen. Because as I said, the other side will kill the person that brings it up. So do we have to be in the streets? Do we have to be burning buildings? Do we have to have a 20% unemployment rate? What is it that's going to say, oh, wait, I get it? And I am very pleased and encouraged about last night because I think it's a step, a firm step in the right direction, but it is only a step, and I have no idea whether or not we really get it.
I'll tell you what my litmus test is, because this is going to be part of a grand bargain. If the new Republican majority in the House passes the Bush tax cuts and extends them for another year, including the tax relief for people who make $1 million a year, and don't pay for it, then it's politics as usual. In 2018, if you extend out the CBO, this includes the war and the health care and all the things that are being talked about. If you extend out the programs that are being talked about, we're going to have about a $1.4 trillion deficit. 60% of that will be due to the Bush tax cuts, because they cut the revenue without cutting the spending. So if the new Republican majority passes the Bush tax cuts, including the high-end tax cuts, without cutting spending to pay for it, then they're not serious. That's just political. The grand bargain has to be this. We will have to raise taxes. I don't think we should raise taxes on middle-class people in a recession. I don't think it makes any difference economically. We're talking about going back to the same tax rate that Clinton had. We did pretty well when Bill Clinton was president, a lot better than we're doing now. So that, you can't convince me that's a job breaker to raise taxes to 39.6%. We can disagree about that, but I don't think so. But I think we all agree that middle-class people are so stressed that every dollar they get and keep, they're going to spend, and that's going to help the economy. So you got to let the Bush tax cuts expire for people. I don't care if it's 250,000. Let it be 500,000. There's some number that works. You've got to go after defense, which Republicans don't want to do. You've got to go after Medicare and stabilize it so it doesn't keep going up, which means cutting benefits. And you've got to go after Social Security. I don't think you have to cut it, but you do have to make sure that it doesn't keep going up the way it is. I wouldn't do it exactly the way Fred does. We can have an erudite discussion about how you would do it, but it has to. We both agree that there's a bottom line there, and we're not there anywhere close to it. So you got to get to there. I continue to be optimistic, but I recognize the danger, and there is a real danger.
Howard Dean famously had his great moment at the end of the Iowa caucus, where he, which became known as the the I Have a Scream speech, where he said, and we're going on to New Hampshire, and we're going on to South Carolina, we're going on to Idaho, and we're going on to Guam, yeah, like that. And tonight, for the gotcha question, I was going to ask him to reprise the I Have a Scream speech with Canadian provinces and bonus points if he got all three. If he got all three.
We're going to Newfoundland and Labrador. We're going to Prince Edward Island. We're going to New Brunswick. Then we're going to Quebec. We're going to Ontario. Then we're going to Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta and British Columbia. And then we're going to go up to the Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories.